Okay, kiddos, welcome back. Today we are going to talk about 5.6. We're talking about congruent triangles. Okay, so make sure that you write your name over here and let's put our grade over there when we're done. So let's first talk about what congruent means, right? Congruent, we know that congruent means same size and same shape. Same size and the same shape. Okay, so that's what congruent means. So now that we recognize and remember that congruent means same size, same shape, let's go ahead and see how we can apply that for these practices today. Okay, so when we're given congruent polygons, what we need to remember are that corresponding sides are going to be congruent. Okay, so the sides that are corresponding are going to be congruent, and the corresponding angles are also going to be congruent. So if we know that we're given congruent polygons, all right, so if we're saying that they are having the same size and the same shape, okay, if we're saying that those are congruent, same size, same shape, that means that they are, the sides are going to be congruent and the angles are congruent. Okay, so let's get right into some practice on that. So imagine that I see these two polygons right over here. And this says ABCD is congruent to EFGH, right? So if we look right over here, we got A, B, C, D, and this one is EFGH, right? And this symbol right over here, we know that means is congruent to. Okay, so we said that corresponding sides are congruent and corresponding angles are congruent. So let's look at these sides. Okay, so if we see right over here, we see this one has 2 arcs on B, right? That one has 3, that one has 4, and that one has 1. On this one, we also have 4, 3, 2, and 1. So let's look at the corresponding points. One thing we want to remember is they go in the same order. This is going from A, B, C, D. So from 3 to 2 to 1 to 4. And then EFGH, 3 to 2 to 1 to 4. So they correspond. Okay, so what points correspond? A corresponds with E because it's the first letter, right? So A, point A corresponds with point B, right? And then, I'm sorry, point E, right? And then B corresponds with, since B is the second one right over here, it corresponds with F, right? And then C corresponds with, that's right, G, because that's the third one, right? Okay, and then D corresponds with, since D is the fourth one, right? That's going to correspond with H. That's the fourth one. Okay. All right, so we said corresponding parts are congruent. Okay, so the sides, we said A, B, right? That goes between the first 2 letters. So A, B is going to be congruent with E to F, right? A, B, side AB is congruent with side E, F. Okay, all right. Then what about this side, BC? Well, BC is these two, so BC is going to be congruent with FG, right? So BC is congruent with FG, right? What about this one? We're going to say that CD is going to be congruent with GH, right? CD is congruent with GH, right? And then this last one, DA, right? DA is going to be congruent with HE. DA is congruent with HE. Okay, so what we have to remember is that they go in the same order. So we can just look over here and know which ones are congruent by seeing which one matches up, or we can also follow it on the physically diagram. All right, so what about the angles? Well, which angles? Well, A, right, would correspond with, since it's the first one, you would think it's E also, right? So just look, this has 3 arcs. E also has 3 arcs, so that makes sense, right? So angle A is congruent with angle E, right? Angle B is congruent with angle F, right? Angle C is congruent with angle G, right? Angle D is congruent with angle H, right? Because that's what we got here. A, E, B, F, C, G, and D, and H. All right, so those are corresponding parts. All right, so let's get right into some delta math practice on that. Okay, so let's take a look over here. It says figure 1 and 2 are congruent. Okay, so we're told that those are congruent, so we know that those are congruent. So now we can say which one is the corresponding point to U. All right, let's look at U is right over here, right? So if we notice, this is the short part, right? This is only 1 unit. Well, which side only has 1 unit? That's going to be right over here. But let's look. If we think about it, it kind of crosses over that line right there, right? It kind of crosses over that line. So U corresponds with, we would say U corresponds with E, right? That's going to be with point E. Okay, U corresponds with point E. All right, next, let's look over here. It says figure 1 and 2 are congruent. All right, which angle corresponds with angle Q? All right, so pause the video for a moment, see if you can get that. All right, Q is going to be right over here, right? So let's look. If we see this right here, it looks like this swung around like this right over here, right? So let's look. This N is the farthest one right over here, right? So if I go from the farthest one and then I go this way, right? That means it is E, right? So E. Okay, so we're just looking at how it corresponds. So this one we rotate. This one we flip over. Okay? All right, let's take a look at this one. Okay, so it says figure 1 and 2 are congruent. So we know they have the same size and the same shape. So they're saying which side corresponds with KL. All right, KL. See what you think about that one. KL is going to be that one right there, right? So KL, it's not this one, right? It's not that side. It's not this side. It's not this side. KL would be this one right here, SQ, right? That would be this one right over here, SQ. All right, so hopefully you got that quite simply. All right, so make sure that we go ahead and go right into the practice now so you can see if you do get those. Otherwise, if you're not sure, just let me know, raise your hand. All right, so let's make sure we did that before we go on to our next part of our practice. So now, here's how we can determine if they are congruent. Okay, so this is determining if they are congruent. Before we told you that when they were congruent, they told us. So now here's how we determine. All right, so the first step, we are going to label the congruent sides with an S. Okay, so if we see sides congruent, we're going to use an S. And then we're going to use congruent angles, we're going to use an A. All right, so congruent angles, we use the A. All right, so let's take a look at these right over here. Okay, so what do we know? Well, this one has 2 arcs, right? And this is an angle M. This one has 1 arc, this one has 2. So M and S are both congruent. So we said we're going to mark that with an A because those are angles, right? Angles with an A. Okay? So then we said if we're going to mark the angles with an A, we're going to mark the sides with an S that are congruent. So what do we see? We see 1 tick mark over here, and then we see 1 tick mark over here. So those sides are congruent. So we're going to say this side and this side are congruent on that one, right? And then, well, what else do we notice? The only other hint, we have that angle and that angle, that side, that side. This is also an angle, right? So this angle has 1 arc. That's congruent with that one. So we said we're going to put an A next to that one. Okay, so that was A, that was A, that was A, and that was S. So, okay, so next, circle the letter that's farthest away from the other letters. So farthest away would either be, this one's in the middle, right? So if I'm looking at this figure itself, if I'm looking at this figure, the one that's farthest away would be this one right here, right? That's in the middle. This is also the farthest away, so we can start on either end. Okay, but say I started with this one right over here. If I do that, if I circle that, okay, circle the farthest one away, okay, then we said we are Number 3, we are going to connect it to the closest letter. You cannot cut through the triangle. Okay, this is crucial. We cannot cut through the triangle. So we're going to go to the closest letter. S might look like it's the closest letter, but we said we cannot cut through the triangle, right? So we can't go this way. We have to go this way. Because if I went this way, that's not the closest one, right? A is closer. That's a far distance. So the closest one is going this way. So connect it to the closest letter. So I'm just going to put a different color there so you see. So I'm going to connect it to the closest letter. Okay, then it says connect it to the final letter. So I'm going to connect that to the final letter. Okay, all right. Next, once I've done that, determine if it's one of the 5 congruence theorems. It can be backwards, but you cannot switch up the letters. So what we can do is we can see if it goes backwards, but we can't switch it up. So determine if it's one of these theorems. So this is AAS, right? So let's write that down. AAS, right? Now, what if I said that I circled this one first, right? And then I went this way. That would be SAA, right? SAA. Now, what we said was that it can be backwards. Okay, so these are both the same thing, right? Because it goes the same way. Either way, we'll look. So these we can tell. This is enough information right here to tell that they are congruent. This is enough information. Okay, these are enough information. Okay, these are not enough. Okay, so they may be not enough info. Okay, so if it's one of these, it still may be congruent, but it's not enough information. This is enough information. So let's see, AAS. If we look over here, SSS, SAS, ASA, AAS. Yes, this one is this. So yes, this one is congruent. We would say yes on those. Okay. All right, so that's what we're going to do. So let's get right into this. So we said if it's one of these, we're going to label which ones are congruent, the angle or the side with an A or S. Okay, we're going to circle the one that's farthest away. Okay, then we are going to connect it to the next letter. Okay, and then we are going to connect it to the final letter and then see if it's one of these. If it's one of these, it's enough. If it's not this, if it's one of those, it's not enough. Okay, so let's get right into this right over here. It says determine the relationship between these 2 triangles and determine whether or not they can be proven congruent. So if it can, it's going to be one of these. Okay, so first step, we said we're going to label the congruent item. So that's a side and this side, right? S and S. Okay, what else? We see this with the 2 and we see that with the 2, right? So that's a side and that's also a side, right? Then what do we notice? I see this, right? That's an angle, and that's an angle. They are the same angle, right? So that is congruent. So they show the same symbol on each one of those, right? So now we said we are going to, second step, we're going to circle the farthest letter. Okay, so I'm going to circle that one. I could circle this S or this S, but if you look at it and we see it's going to be the same answer either way. Okay, so on this one I have side, so let's connect those, right? We're going to say with the side gets connected to A and then S, right? So that's going to be SAS. Okay, and SAS is one of these. So the 2 triangles are related by side, angle, side. So the 2 triangles are congruent. Okay, side, angle, side. Okay, now if you notice, I did not cut through it. I can't go SSA. I have to go in order. I cannot cut through the triangle. All right, so that was enough. So let's look at another example. So this one right here, let's see what we say. Find out, right? This one says determine whether or not they can be congruent or not. All right, so let's take a look at what we see. And so I see right over here, this is a side with 1, right? So that's over here a side with 1, right? Over here I see a angle that's a right angle, also see a right angle, right? So I can say that's an angle, and I can say that's an angle, right? And then I see this one with 2 and this one with 2. So I know that's a side and that's a side, right? So now let's look at what we have. Now here's the one thing. When it's a right triangle, first check if HL. Okay, so if it's a right triangle, we're going to first see if it's HL. HL stands for hypotenuse leg. So if we have the hypotenuse and a leg, then it's going to use HL. Now, what's the hypotenuse? In a right triangle, okay, the hypotenuse, remember, is always across from that right angle. Okay, that's always the hypotenuse. Okay, and then this is called a leg. Okay, and then this also is called a leg. And so the hypotenuse is opposite the right angle. Okay, so let's see if it's hypotenuse. So that is the hypotenuse, right? That's the hypotenuse right there. So this one. And let's see, do we also have a leg? Leg, we said, is one of the other ones. Well, that's a leg, right? And that's a leg. So we'd say that's a leg, right? And if that's the hypotenuse, then we're going to say it's HL. Okay, because this is not a common mistake, is to say it's ASS, right? Or SAA. But we have to check this first. It's not ASS. And it's not SSA. Okay, so that's what we have to keep in mind on those, right? If it is a right triangle, so if we see this, we have to consider first if it's hypotenuse leg. So that one is what this one is, right? We said that's hypotenuse leg. So let's go ahead, and those are related by HL, so they are congruent. All right, let's keep it moving. All right, let's see over here. Determine the relationship between these two angles. All right, let's pause the video and see what you can come up with. All right, so I see 1 over there. That's a side. That's a side, right? I see a 2 over there. That's a side. That's a side. And then what is this? Is that a side or an angle? That is an angle, right? Angle, angle. All right, which one is the farthest? Okay, this is definitely the middle, right? So we're going to say that's the farthest, right? So let's circle that one. So if I say S, then goes to S and then A, right? So that would be SSA. Okay, so let's look. Well, we can also say this is ASS, right? Well, this is right over here, SSA. We said that's also ASS, right? So what we can remember is no bad words. All right, so that's how we can remember that SSA or ASS are not congruent because we can't use those bad words. So these are related by ASS, or we can say SSA, right? And so these are not congruent, not congruent. Okay, so that's an example of not being congruent. All right, so let's check this one out. What do we notice about this one? That's an angle of 2, angle 2. Angle of 3, angle of 3. Angle of 1, angle of 1, right? So we're going to say angle, 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 right? Angle, angle, angle. So it doesn't matter which one I start with. That one goes A. So these are related by A. And if we looked over here, A is not enough. That's not enough. Okay, so these may look like they are congruent, but it's not enough. Okay, so it's not enough information because those are A. So we're going to say that's angle, angle, angle. Okay, this one we said was hypotenuse leg. Okay, this one we said was side angle side. This one we're going to say is side side angle. Okay, all right, let's keep it moving. We got 3 left. All right, determine the relationship between these two. Okay, well, what do we notice on these? We have a side with 2 and a side with 3, right? So we're going to say that's side side side, right? Side, 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 SSS. Let's look at our chart. Is SSS good? SSS is enough. Yes, that is enough. So we're going to say yes, they are congruent. Okay? All right. Next, let's look at these last 2. What do you think about this one? This one is an angle with 2, angle with 2. This is a side with 1, side. That's an angle. That's an angle, right? Check the farthest one, A to S to A. That's going to be angle, side, angle, right? Angle, side, angle. If we look at our chart, let's look. Angle, side, angle. Angle, side, angle is enough. So they are congruent. Okay, and then this last one, what do you think about this one? Okay, so on this one, we want to remember that this one is tricky. Okay, so this one's tricky, so check this out. All right, so on this one, what do we notice? This is angle, right? Okay, so angle. Okay, what do we notice about this? This is a side, right? Side, right? And then what do we notice about this? This is an angle also, right? Angle. So let's circle the farthest one. So S. Okay, so here's the tricky thing. Now that I circled the S, we have 3 different ways that we could do this. So here's what we want to understand. Okay, so is it going this way? Is it going, if we said that, is it going S, A, or is it going S, A, or is it going A, S, A? Right? So you might have a dilemma. Which one is it? Right? Because it could be any of those combinations. But we remember we start on the outside, right? And we have to go the easiest way. So if we go the easiest way, it's going to be S, A, A. Okay, SAA is the easiest way. Why is that? Because this is faster. SAA. Okay, now we look at the other way. SAA. SAA. That's also the same thing, right? Either one of those is the same. SAA. But let's look over here. ASA. ASA. ASA would be cutting through because it's no, because it cuts through. Okay, so it's not ASA. Okay, it's not ASA, it's going to be a SAA or AAS. Okay, so they are related by SAA, or we can think AAS, so they are congruent. All right, you got this, folks. If you have any questions, just let me know.